Welcome everyone for day 3 of the Linking Your Thinking conference. I'm really excited for our presenter today, someone who's kind of developed into a modern online friend, and eventually I'm sure we're going to see each other in person, but a little bit of background on our presenter for today, Mike. So Mike was an attendee of the Linking Your Thinking workshop, which surprised me because I was aware of Mike's online presence from working at the Suite Setup at the time and other places. You probably maybe know of Mike through different podcasts, Bookworm or the Focused podcast. And eventually he invited me to be on the Focused podcast last year with David Sparks, Max Sparky, who's actually presenting in 2 hours. And that was just amazing because that was sort of my first foray into, whoa, there's a bigger world and community out there and really great people, because I was kind of just working in a little silo. So really appreciate that kind offering early on, Mike. And Mike, if wherever you see him, he's helping busy people be more productive and creative. And in this particular session, this will be he's going to kind of walk through a personal retreat method that unlocks your brain's ability to naturally unravel complex problems. He's going to talk a lot about asking the right questions to bring about clarity, and why Obsidian is a perfect tool for documenting this personal retreat experience. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for that wonderful intro. On the topic of how we got connected, I just want to share that some of the nicest people I have met online first. So that's kind of the cool thing about the world that we live in, is that you don't have to just stay in the community that you're physically located in. You have the ability to connect with like-minded people. And I think the thing that kind of brought us together was just like a growth mindset and constantly wanting to learn and to get better. And I just want to admonish everybody here, I'm still getting used to being like an internet personality, but one of the things that I try to do is constantly pay it forward. I really do believe that you don't know who you're impacting. Like, you don't know someone who asks a question in a chat like this. I've never met these people, but I've been on the receiving end of someone that I didn't really have a relationship with, who took time out and like answered a question, and it just completely changed my course. So that's how I try to live my life. And the internet would be a better place if everybody took that approach, I think.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely agree with that, Mike. And I think we have, responsibilities to, hopefully be good stewards of knowledge and insights. And many people in the chat on this call, I'm including you in that. It's part of what makes this part of the internet, I guess, so warm. And I think there's a lot of good stuff that we're up to. And that kind of is I don't know, maybe a good segue into, your personal retreats, putting a little bit of intentionality and focus around what you're up to. I don't know, really. I'm excited to learn, though.
Cool. Well, I can share my screen and we can get started here with these personal retreats. I love seeing all these comments coming in saying, boy, I could use a personal retreat. I really need one.
Yes.
I love that this idea is kind of taking off in the last couple of years. I had never heard of anything like this when I had started it. But I think it's something that can benefit just about anybody. So before I go any further, I just want to make sure that you can see my screen, you can still hear my audio. Oh, wait for the thumbs up. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank through kind of the foundational stuff for my personal retreat framework, and then show how I accomplish different pieces of that inside of Obsidian and pull it all together. I'll have a list of all the different things that I use. We have links to everything, but I'm going to go a little bit quick here, so we have time at the end for questions. Number one, why a personal retreat? Because I've discovered when it comes to our own success, we tend to be our own worst enemies. We get in our own way. And I remember reading Work the System by Sam Carpenter, and he talked about how to see things right, you have to get above and slightly outside and above your situation so you can see it for what it really is. And that got me thinking about how I'm just cranking on all these projects and doing all this stuff, and maybe I just need to like take a break and look at it from a different perspective. The definition for retreat is a place providing peace, quiet, privacy, or security. There's something magical about getting away with your thoughts, and all of those things come when you allow your brain the time and space it needs to kind of unravel things. So I got this idea for this personal retreat. It was sort of inspired by the Bill Gates Think Week, where he gets away to a cabin in the woods and just thinks about his business for an entire week. Well, I couldn't do it for an entire week, but I thought I could probably do this for a single day, just 24 hours. So I did that. I went up to a place in Door County here in Wisconsin in the winter. There's like nothing going on up there. So there's like nobody around, no visitors, no distractions. And I just got away and I thought for 24 hours, and I was amazed at the clarity that came from that. So then I started thinking through like, how could I improve this? Eventually landed on this framework. But the gist of it is this quote by Keith Cunningham, like the personal retreat helps you not do more smart things, but less dumb things. So you don't make emotional decisions. So you don't swing at bad pitches. If you're just stuck in the day to day, everything seems urgent. Things have artificial importance, right? So you need to kind of disconnect and let your brain figure out what's really going on. And your brain is really good at solving problems. You just need to unplug from your normal routine. You got to eliminate the distractions, and you got to force yourself to wrestle through that stuff. It's not easy, but your brain is good at it. And it takes a lot of effort, but if you give it the time and space it needs, it'll help you unpack what's really going on and see things right. So the key concept with the personal retreat is just this thinking time. When you ask the right questions, the answers usually become clear, I've discovered. And just real briefly, my beginning with this was out of frustration because I was trying to implement the 12-week year. This is based on the book by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. And I don't have the chat open, but I'll ask how many people have tried to do something with this. I'm sure it's more than a couple. And maybe you were like I was, and you're frustrated because you're not getting the traction that you want. Great idea, but it's not working for me, right? So I assumed that I was the problem and decided, maybe I can implement this personal retreat to kind of like give this a kickstart. And that really was the thing that allowed it to click for me. I went from not being able to accomplish my goals to having the clarity and the motivation that achieving those things actually becomes easy. So the personal retreat doesn't allow me to do more, but it allows me to do the right things, and it crystallized a lot of things for me. The path forward became clear. So the personal retreat helps you find your why. The clearer your thinking, the stronger your why. The stronger your why, the greater your motivation. The stronger your motivation, the more consistent your action. We know what to do, we just have trouble doing it. And that consistent action is the key. Simon Sinek said that intensity is like going to the dentist. Consistency is brushing every day. And I really love that. So consistency comes from understanding your why. And that's where the personal retreat comes in. Consistency beats intensity every single day. So here is real briefly my process for the personal retreat. I review my core values. I review my journal entries. I go through a wheel of life exercise. I review my ideal future. There's a retrospective that I split into 2 parts, and I'll walk through all those questions. Then at the end, thinking about the goals and habits for the next 90 days, because I do this quarterly. And then I review or revise my perfect week if necessary. All right, so core values, this is pretty simple. Core values are kind of like your guiding principles. And I would encourage you, if you never thought about this, a lot of organizations and companies have core values, but they don't really mean anything, right? They're just like a mission statement. Generally, we want to make the world a better place. Well, how the heck are you going to do that, right? So I think these are very important personally, though. And they can even be applied to your family as well. I remember going through an exercise called the Mission to Mars. And this was from, I think, Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. And the whole exercise is that if you could send 5 people who embodied everything that was best about your company or organization to an alien world, who would they be and what would they embody? Right. So I was thinking about this. I could do this for my family because I'm married and I have 5 kids at home. And so my wife and I got away one day in 2017, and we identified kind of what we want our family to look like as our kids grow older, and then identified these core values, which we filter everything that we do through these. Are we living in alignment with these values? And these values affect not just the goals, but also the habits that are going to lead to our desired outcome, both building positive habits and also avoiding negative ones. We can probably all pick something from our childhood that our parents did. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Right. Well, that's kind of where this originated from. I wanted to have a relationship with my kids when they got to be teenagers where they felt comfortable talking to my wife and I about anything. As they're going through these hard things, trying to figure things out, that they know that we're going to listen and not judge, right? That was kind of the end goal, because I didn't really have that. I had a lot of great things about my upbringing, but that was one thing that I wanted to fix, right? So that was kind of the inspiration for these core values. And then I had them, had a graphic designer friend design this manifesto type graphic, had it printed, framed, it's hanging on our living room wall. We look at it every single day. So if you want to start developing your own core values, these are some of the questions I would ask you to start with. What legacy do you want to leave? What are you passionate about? What are you happiest? When are you happiest in life? What gives you life? What do you value? What do you absolutely refuse to do? How do you measure success? And how do you want people to remember you? There's lots of other questions that you could use, but this kind of is like your North Star. You know, if you're not living in alignment with your values, the motivation's not going to be there. You can tell when you're living a lie. And these core values that you pick, I would just, one other tip here, don't make them aspirational core values. Like someday I want to do this. Like what is really important to you right now? And then just write those things down. Start with just a couple. You don't need to have 5. You definitely don't have 10. The more core values you have, the less meaning each one of them has. And they start to compete with each other. There's got to be an instant connection between this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it, because it's helping me live out these values, these things that are important to me. All right, so then the next thing I do is I review my journal entries. Now I journal using daily notes in Obsidian in kind of a weird way. So I wanted to walk through this. There'll be some connected note stuff in here. So first, this is what my daily note looks like. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm going to break this down piece by piece. The top part, well, first there's like a timeline that just shows the day in terms of the year, and that little circle just moves as it progresses. And this is a template inside my daily notes folder, so it fills in the dates based on the date that I create the daily note. But the next section is the Obsidian task plugin, pulling in everything that is due today. So when I recorded this video, I needed to prep the slide deck for the Light conference here. And then this is kind of the logic behind this using the Obsidian task plugin. So it's everything that's not done. The due before, this is actually in the template. It's saying due before tomorrow. So it's got some date math, date plus 1 day, year dash month dash day. Then that converts it to tomorrow. Short mode is on, so I don't have like a really long text string there. And then I hide the backlinks because I can always get to those if I need them. But really, this is just a reminder, throwing it in my face as I open up my daily note at the beginning of the day. Hey, you should be thinking about doing these things because these are really important. But then the journaling stuff happens below that. The next section that you will see there is the daily questions. Now, this comes from a book by Marshall Goldsmith. Blanking on, Triggers. And I heard him talk about this, and this I thought was genius. Maybe you've tried journaling and you've tried journaling prompts. And prompts are usually like, what did you accomplish today, right? And it's all based on the outcome. And if you don't have a very good day for whatever reason, maybe you're not feeling well, whatever, you give yourself a low score and then you feel bad about it, right? So the daily questions are based on intention. Did I do my best to? And this was a complete game changer for me in terms of journaling. I didn't resist the prompts anymore. It was just based on my effort. So if I'm not feeling well and I go for a short run, I give myself a 10 for exercise, even if I, like on a different day, feel great and run 8 miles, right? So it's all based on the intention. There's no outcome associated with this. These are completely subjective, just basically how I feel like I am doing. I'm focusing on the inputs, not the outputs. I can't control the outputs necessarily in every area of my life, but I can control the inputs, right? The lead measures, not the lag measures. So my daily questions here, and you can identify your own daily questions. These are the ones that resonated with me. So did I do my best to grow spiritually, love my wife, love my kids, be a good friend, learn something, create something, and exercise? Those don't perfectly map to the wheel of life, but they basically do. And then I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10. Now, Marshall Goldsmith talked about doing this in an Excel spreadsheet. And when I heard that, I was like, ew. but I thought Obsidian might be great for this. So what I've done is I've got these here, and then I've got the tag. All right. So the tag is, this is a nested tag, daily questions slash spiritual slash wife slash kids, and then a colon and then a number. Okay. Now there's another plugin called Tracker, which is going to use all of that stuff in a little bit. But just like this in the workflow, I'm filling this out at the end of the day or as I go throughout my day. A lot of times I'll go for a run in the middle of the day, or I'll create something in the middle of the day, and then I'll just put the number in there because I did a good job here. I already know what the answer is going to be at the end of the day. Whatever I miss, I go back on my phone and add it later. Below this, there are sections for learnings, journal entries, and gratitude. And I use Quick Add to add entries anywhere from Obsidian into those sections for today's daily note. I'm not going to demo all that because I've actually got videos for that. I'll share the links here in a little bit if you want to walk a complete walkthrough on that. But that's just the format here. Okay, and then there's different tags there too. So hashtag journal slash entry, hashtag journal slash gratitude, and then hashtag journal slash learning, I think is the other one. But they're all nested tags. And what that does is it allows me to really apply 2 tags to each of these. So if I went and wanted to see all the journal entries, it'll pull in journal entries, gratitudes, and learnings. But if I wanted to see just the ones that are hashtag journal slash entry, it'll just pull in the entries. Okay, now I like these tags for the personal retreat stuff because I can go to any one of these and just click on a tag, and it's going to show me in the search everything that has that tag, and it's sorted from newest to oldest. So I'll just go down this list and review my journal entries. Now, the other thing that'll happen during my personal retreat, and I'm reviewing this specifically, is taking all those values that I'm capturing day to day, and I have a separate note that I keep in my favorites here called daily questions. And this uses that tracker plugin and pulls in all of the values in these graphs, and then also gives me the average. And again, I'm not going to walk through the specifics of this because I have a video on this specific thing. So I won't waste your time. You can dig into it if you want. But what this does is it allows me to see visually, how did I do? And if there are low points in any one of these areas, I can go to those specific days and I can figure out what happened that day that caused these scores to be low. All right. And then I've got all the different daily question areas here. So as I scroll down, you'll see the areas plus the averages. And for this, and what I do is I collect them all for the last 90 days. So this is from basically March to June, it looks like, based on the end of March to the end of June, based on the legend there at the bottom. And then I'll just update that at my personal retreat for the next 90 days after I review these. What these will do is they will show me the areas that I really should be thinking about focusing on. Like exercise here is pretty low, and that's because I was recovering from a broken hand. I couldn't go to the gym. And so I was starting to feel that, and that might affect some of the goals that I set for the next quarter in my personal retreat. All right, I mentioned there's a couple videos that walk through all of this stuff. Here are 2 of the links, and there'll be another one later when I get to the dashboard stuff. But this will walk you through everything in setting all of that stuff up, even from like click on the gear, go to community plugins, here's the plugin that you install, and then my whole workflow for using that. All right, so that's the journaling stuff. I'm going pretty quick. Should I keep going, Nick, or any questions at this point?
Yeah, it's looking really good. And Dan is staying up to the links and throwing those in the chat. So you can easily grab those links there. And also just giving everyone the heads up that we do have the Q&A open. So there are some questions coming in the chat. Go ahead and look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, hover your mouse around, and you should see where there's a Q&A. And somebody who does a great job of preparing to make the most out of attending a session has already led the group with a question, and that is the one and only Danny Hatcher. So if you can prepare for meetings like Danny does, you're going to get more out of them than the rest of the people here. It's pretty impressive. Anyways, back to you, Mike. I'd say just keep going. It's great.
Okay, cool. All right, so then the next part here is the Wheel of Life. This is not something that is unique to me. This is just a visual representation of your current happiness in the major areas of your life. And I've seen different wheels of life previously. The important thing about this is it's not objective. It's just how you feel. So just trusting your gut. In fact, this was originally created back in 1960 by Paul J. Meyer to assess and understand how areas of your life relate to each other. This is kind of what it looks like. What you do is you identify the major areas of your life that you want to keep tabs on. You rate your happiness with each of those major areas on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you pick the lowest areas, and those are the areas that you want to set goals with, right? So in the personal retreat course that I developed, I actually have like a PDF workbook where you can fill this in good notes. And I did that for a long time. I really enjoyed that. This is what my first wheel of life looked like. And just as an example of action items from this one, my lowest area here was social. Okay, so that's the one I focused on. And actually, what we did, I say we because my wife was involved, we bought new living room furniture so we could facilitate small gatherings. And we established a monthly kibbutz, which was an idea I picked up from Nir Eyal in uh, what book was that? Indistractable, I think. And then Priya Parker in The Art of Gathering. And we started having couples over. We would seed the questions prior, like this is what we want to discuss, and just try to facilitate intentional conversation. So we started doing that every single month as a way to boost that social score. That happened right before everything got shut down with COVID, but it definitely was successful, and we're still implementing pieces of this, and it looks a little bit different, but that's an example of like this driving some of those action items. The other thing that's key with this is no matter what your scores are with these different areas, you could say, well, there's a whole bunch of areas low here. Career and work is low, finances are low, fun and recreation is low. But don't try to fix all that stuff at once. Okay. That's the whole idea behind these quarterly personal retreats, these 90-day windows, is that you can boost one of these, get it to a good spot, and then go focus on another one. The whole idea of work-life balance, I believe, is a myth. There is just your life, and you have to figure out how to make it all work. So if there's a whole bunch of things that need attention, you can't spread your attention across all those things. You won't move the needle. So a key concept I picked up from that book, The 12-Week Year, is this idea of intentional imbalance. You want to put your thumb on the scale for the areas that are important right now. Okay, so you boost those, and then once it gets to the point where it's fine and it doesn't need constant supervision, you can leave that area for a little bit, go focus on another area. And you know that you have this, if you do this regularly, in 90 days, I'm going to come back and look at this stuff again, and I'm going to have an opportunity to shift my focus. So it frees me from having to like scan the horizon and look for those fires that are going on. I can just focus on the thing in front of me for a little bit, and then I can reevaluate. All right, next up is the ideal future. And I'm not going to share my ideal future. That is a note in Obsidian as well. But the idea behind this is just basically, what do you want your life to look like? If you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. I like this quote that says, those who do not think about the future cannot have one. So take some time to think about what you really want out of life and paint a picture of what that ideal future looks like in vivid detail. The more you can see it, the easier it is to create it. Right? You need to see it before it can become real. One of the things that I like to do if you have trouble just getting started with this is just think about, what does a day in the life of future you look like? And get as specific as you can. What time do you get up? What do you do during the day? Who is there with you? What kind of job do you have? What's your state of mind? Where do you live? What do you do for fun? What do you do for exercise? What kind of car do you drive? What is your relationship with your significant other like? What's your relationship with your kids like? This is essentially what we did with the family core values, right? You can insert questions around whatever is important to you, and then just paint a picture of what that looks like for you. Okay. We're not going to put a time on this because we don't want to get frustrated when it doesn't happen as fast as we want, but we want a mile marker that we're moving towards. And when we paint this picture, it creates that motivation to keep going in that direction. And then you also have to write it down, which is why I love putting it in Obsidian, because I can link to it and I can review it frequently. It's right there. It's one link away. But if it's not written down, it doesn't really exist. If you've thought, yeah, I know what I want my future to look like, but you've never taken the time to write it down, do that. It'll take you 15, 20 minutes maybe to get started. And you'll be amazed at how much motivation comes the minute that you start to, and how much more detail you get the minute that you start to write this down. There's a saying that thoughts disentangle themselves through lips and pencil tips. Well, for me, it's also clicky keyboards in Obsidian. And ideal future is a great way to do that. Next is the retrospective, and this is where the magic happens. This is really just asking questions. It's the most powerful part of the personal retreat for me, asking those questions and giving my brain the time and space it needs to unravel things. When you ask the right questions, the answers become clear. Mark Champagne, the guy who wrote Personal Socrates, has this phrase in there: a single question has the power to change your life. Absolutely love that. Now, what I have found is that simple questions tend to work best for me, kind of open-ended questions, because my brain will take it in kind of interesting and unexpected ways. So these are the questions that I use. The first part of this retrospective, I'm thinking about what has happened. So what did I accomplish? And this is really important. Celebrate your wins. My first personal retreat, I remember I went into it at the end of the year, and I was thinking that I really hadn't done a whole lot. And then I started listing out all the things that I had done. And when I was finished with that accomplishments list, I was amazed. I'm like, wow, I actually crushed it this year. Right. So you can't trust the story that your brain is telling you without having it written down. That's what this does. So celebrate your wins, celebrate what things went well. This is really just kind of what things clicked for me, what things seemed easy. Now, just because something is easy, that doesn't mean that it automatically should be done. But I think there's some truth to the things that, but we tend to undervalue the things that we're good at because they're easy for us. Nick, you probably relate to this, creating stuff online. You hesitate to share stuff at first because you're like, well, this is simple. Everybody knows this, but not everybody knows it. And don't devalue the fact that you are good at certain things, right? So that's what this is all about. And then this is the one that my brain naturally kind of goes to, is what could have gone better. It's a more positive way of saying basically what's broken. And in addition to just identifying like, well, this is bad and this is bad, asking why. I am a very logical, analytical systems thinker, and I always am asking myself why. My wife kind of hates it sometimes because she's like, it doesn't really matter. Can't we just move on? Like, no, I got to know, why did this happen? So I like to find things that are broken. I like to experiment with new inputs and processes in hopes of getting better results, and personal retreat's a great playground for that. So after this, I typically take a little bit of a break. And then I come back and I ask the big questions. And these are very simple, but very powerful. The first one is, what should I start doing? What opportunities are there basically to try something new or different? And I get excited about new stuff. So this one's easy to have a whole big list of things, but you can't just keep adding things. You'll quickly be overwhelmed. So the next question is actually the critical one. What should I stop doing? In every quarter, every personal retreat that I do, I force myself to pick one current commitment to say no to. And what this does is it ensures that I have the margin to say yes to the things that I'm really excited about. It doesn't mean that the thing has to stop being done. Maybe it's something that I was doing that I could delegate to somebody else, and it would free me up to do this creative thing that only I can do. Right. So the idea, though, is to lean into your unique abilities, basically. Do the things that really bring you life, the things that no one else can do. And also reevaluating. Now, I made this commitment in the past, but if I were presented with this opportunity now, would I still make the same commitment? Just because something was a heck yes in the past doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you right now. So just putting all the commitments on the table and figuring out what's still important. And then what should I keep doing? So these are things that I've noticed. There's fruit from this. What's really clicking? Where do I want to make sure that I maintain some momentum? Because I'm not a big, I'm going to talk about goals in a little bit, but I don't like the emphasis that goals have. If you just stop at the goals, you're missing the point, because really what allows you to achieve those goals is the development of habits and routines. Habits and routines have to be built. They take some time to get there, but that's really what the journaling is all about. Did I show up today? Did I do the thing today? Right? Just focus on that. Don't focus on trying to create something. And that's what this does, is what are the things that I'm doing regularly that are moving the needle? And I want to make sure that I'm continuing to do those. Now, this process right here with the start, stop, keep doing. A caveat here, do not rush this, because if you've never done a personal retreat before, after 20, 30 minutes, you'll have a list and you'll be like, okay, cool, I'm done, I can move on. Don't do it because you're not done yet, not even close. Just continue to let your brain brew on this stuff. This part always takes me a couple of hours, but I found that you hit that wall, you've got some things, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. And if you just stick with it, you get to a whole new level. And all of a sudden there's like tons of clarity that comes, but you got to let your brain kind of marinate on this stuff. Okay, so once you identify all that stuff, looked at the past, thought about the future, then you want to set some goals. And goals are fine, but like I said, you need to take it a step further. You got to figure out the habits that are going to allow you to not just achieve those goals, but are going to make accomplishing those goals inevitable. It's almost like if you start at the goal, you break it down into the habits, and then you focus on the habits and you completely forget about the goal. All right, so the habits allow you to make winning inevitable. Let me give you an example. Kind of the thing that spurred me getting connected and doing all the stuff online that I do was this desire that I had to write a book. And I am not a writer. I didn't go to school for writing. So like, I don't know how to do this, but I guess I better figure out how to write. So I just started showing up every day, writing, publishing to my blog for, I would write for an hour before I went into work at the office. And within 2 weeks, saw that I was, that someone was hiring for a content creator position. I reached out and I'm not really interested, but I'd like to get more reps in. So, and they said, well, if you have anything, send it our way. Send it my blog. Say, hey, this is really good. Want to give this a shot. That led to some additional projects, part-time, then a full-time position. In addition to self-publishing my book after 8 months. It needs to be updated. I'm not going to link to that one because I don't recommend anybody buy it at the moment. But that creative habit has been the foundation of everything that I do online. And it started with just showing up and writing. And that consistency, that beats velocity. Just show up every day. When you show up every day, you start to build momentum. You start to build a streak. I get this picture of like this old steam engine. It takes a long time for it to get going, but then once it gets going, then it's hard to stop. Before you can take consistent action, though, you kind of need to know when you're going to take that action. So the big thing for me was identifying, was it going to happen before I go to the office every day? Patrick Rohn said that everything you do has to be done within this context of time, right? So planning, when am I going to take this action to execute these habits, these routines that are going to make the goals inevitable? One of my favorite quotes by Dwight Eisenhower, plans are worthless, planning is everything. And in Atomic Habits, James Clear kind of explains why goals don't produce the results, the systems do. And the plan is going to provide the intention to follow through on those systems. Okay, so here's my perfect week. And this is just something I created. It's part of the personal retreat course workbook that I've got. And you can do it digitally too, but just basically giving every hour a job, filling this out, not just with the things that I have to do, but the things that I want to do. So you'll see like date night on here every Tuesday. And because I put that on my perfect week outline here, that happens 95% of the time, right? So it's not always going to go exactly according to plan, but it significantly increases the chances of this working. And again, giving every hour a job, this is the foundation of the time blocking habit that I do every single day. I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot here today, but this is kind of the ideal. And then as you plan your day, if you notice that you're drifting from that ideal, then you think about, well, what are the things that I should maybe say no to, or what are the adjustments I need to make in order to get myself back towards that ideal week. All right, so that's the process. By the end of this, you're going to be exhausted, but you will have clarity and motivation to make significant positive changes in your life. I guarantee that. Real quickly, here is that timeline again with time estimates. Okay, so like I said, this is an entire day for me. I review my core values, I review my journal entries, I go through the wheel of life, review my ideal future, answer those first 3 questions in the retrospective, take a lunch break, come back, answer the last 3, which that part is 2 hours. That's the longest part of the entire retreat. Set my goals and habits, review, revise my perfect week. And then Obsidian is where all of this stuff comes together, right? So this is, I don't know, on the one hand, I feel like this really isn't all that impressive because it's just plain text and it's linked, but I'm not doing anything like super crazy with this. I will say though that this has been incredible doing this inside of Obsidian. The clarity comes so much faster when I can put it all together visually in a single note like this. All right, so here's what it looks like. This is my personal retreat from last quarter. And there's a template which I'll share if you wanted to do something similar. Okay, so I've got the date stamp when I create this using this template. This is the date that I did my retreat. My core values are there at the top. And when I say review core values, once you establish these, you don't really spend a whole lot of time on these. Just going through these and making sure they still resonate. If anything is wrong, I give myself permission to change it at this point, but I've never actually done that in the years that I've been doing this. Next is the Wheel of Life. This is using a plugin called Charts View. And this you can access via the command palette. Again, there's a video on how to set this up. But this drops in this code and the different areas there are the different items. So item, spiritual, career work, love, family, health, fitness, personal growth, fun and recreation, social, or finances. Again, you can label those whatever you want. And then I give myself a score from 0 to 10. And there's a lot of 8s and 9s in this one. That's not always the case, but having done this for a while, I've been able to boost some of those areas that were significantly lower. And then that renders with this radar graph, which isn't exactly what I was doing in GoodNotes on my iPad, but you get the idea. And I actually like the way that this visually looks a little bit better. And then what I do is I've got all those different areas. I've got sections for what are the things that I've noticed that have contributed to those scores. So spiritual, career work, love and family. There's a whole bunch of bullet points under each one of these that I just capture my thoughts as I'm thinking about what are my scores for these different areas. I won't go through the specifics of all that. I think you kind of get the idea, but I try to have at least 3 or 4 bullets for each one of these areas. And then below that, I've got the retrospective questions. Now, there's not a ton in here, especially for what did I accomplish, what went well, what could have gone better, because I want the highlights. I want the important stuff. So you might, this is just personal preference. You know, if you wanted a list of 20 different things, you could do that. But I want basically enough to have the clarity to move forward. So I'm not spending a ton of time looking at the retrospective piece at this point. All right, so then I go into what should I start doing, stop doing, keep doing. At this point, these are just ideas. So under stop doing, you'll see a whole bunch of question marks. And that's basically me saying, planting the seed in my brain as I chew on this over the next quarter, you know, am I going to do this thing? Some of the things I know I'm going to do this for sure, like the one-on-ones on Thursday mornings, for example, it just didn't work with the schedule. So figuring out a new system for that. But these are the seeds of the things that not only am I going to cut these commitments, but also the things that I'm going to delegate. It's like publishing for Potential Family Bookworm. I've already delegated all the editing for those 2 podcasts to my 14-year-old son. He uses an iPad. It's very much in line with our core values. We want to teach our kids to create, not consume. So when he got interested in creating audio and video, I would explain like, hey, this is, you know, what I do for these podcasts. I would love to offload this. Are you interested? Absolutely loves it. So this is kind of like the next step in that. Like he gives me the files and then I publish them. But I now have a project to offload all that stuff, and I start thinking through what are the processes and the systems I need to create the information he needs in order for me not to think about this anymore. And then at the bottom here, there's the goals. For me, at this point, I knew what I wanted to do was to start dabbling in YouTube. That's under one of my start doing things there. And I believed that that was going to become a key part of just my content process. Already got the podcast, I already do some writing. I did end up taking a different job. You maybe noticed that in at the beginning of January. So I'm not full time at the Suite Setup anymore. And what that has allowed me to do is kind of lean into something that Derek Sivers talks about, where you've got your job that pays the bills, and you've got your art, and there's no pressure to make your art be your job. That really resonated with me. So I started kind of building my ideal future around that model. And video seemed like something that I wanted to incorporate into that. So I signed up for Ali Abdal's Part-Time YouTuber Academy. That was goal number one. And then the other thing I did is I signed up for the Ship 30 for 30, the writing cohort, which today is day 26, 25, I believe. And I published every day for 25 days. So kind of the intention behind this is that I'll get comfortable with YouTube. I'll understand it a little bit more. And I'll have a writing habit, which I can use to not just support the YouTube videos, but also the content that appears on the podcasts and the things that I write for my newsletter and the articles that I write online. Like, I had done that previously with the book. I got away from it for a while, and I wanted to come back to that, make that writing habit be like the foundational thing. This is the first thing I do every single day, hour before I go to work, even though I work online now, virtually. But that's kind of the foundation there. So the next step, which I didn't do in this video here, is those two goals would become projects. And you can just put double brackets around those. I've actually got all my course notes as separate files, but that's kind of the idea. I've got this document now, which condenses all of that heavy lifting I did thinking wise when I was on this personal retreat. And then I link to it on my dashboard page. So this is my dashboard. It's the thing that Obsidian opens to for me. And I've got a video on this as well. Just real briefly, the thing at the top, that's significant to me because I remember I never thought of myself as creative a while back. And it was Austin Kleon, Steal Like an Artist, that gave me permission to create, because I realized that creativity is just connecting dots in new ways. I used to write songs. Now I get frustrated when I would hear like the melody line that I came up with in a song on the radio and be like, I can't create. I can just rip stuff off. And then I realized, well, everybody's doing that. Everything's a remix, right? So just control the inputs, collect the dots, let your brain connect them. And then the output, like creativity is a formula. Don't get upset at that. If you don't like the output, just collect better dots. All right. So there's a story about that somebody had said once, that everyone is born creative, and over time we trade our crayons and we pick up our pencils and we get bogged down with all of the pressures of life and everything that we should do. Maybe you used to be creative and you made something and somebody didn't like it and it felt like a soul crushing blow to you, right? So you just gave up on it for a while. And the story goes that everyone's born creative. We forget how, and the bravest thing you can do is to ask for your crayons back. So I like this picture of somebody like giving me my crayons back. And the thing that's highlighted there is the link to the quarter 2 2022 personal retreat. I have that there so that I'm looking at this page every single day, and I have the ability there to just go look at that and review, what was it that I decided was important? Because if you don't review this, you can lose the motivation. You can think to yourself, well, I remember what I had decided was important, but it gets a little bit foggy. And so I don't have a regular review for this. Probably about once a week though, I'll go back in there and I'll just make sure that, I feel like I am still on the right track with this. All right, so there's the link to the dashboard setup video. And the last thing I'll share here with the whole personal retreat structure is you got to be consistent with it. The first time, it'll feel great, but the real value comes in the second and the third and the fourth, because the first time you do it, you feel like you've got a direction that you've never had before. The second and third time that you do it, you start to realize that you have actually accomplished quite a bit, and it builds the momentum to keep going. And the magical cadence for me is 90 days built on that 12-week year sort of a thing. That's long enough to make significant progress, but it's also short enough to offer several different resets within a calendar year. So if one doesn't go the way that you wanted it to, it's okay. You know, you've got a built-in reset 90 days and you can figure out why it didn't work and try something better. Keep getting easier, but again, don't rush that retrospective process. All right, so here's a list of the Obsidian plugins that I use for all this personal retreat stuff. I think we got links to all of these if you need them. Here are links to the templates that I used. I've got a link for my daily notes template, which is built on the daily questions. And then also I've got a template for the personal retreat stuff using the Charts View plugin if you wanted to use that. And then I've got a course that I put together just built on this framework. So if you want more information on the process of the personal retreat, this isn't really going to be Obsidian related, but if it is interesting to you, there's a link to this. And if you use the coupon code LightConf, it's normally $37. It's $20 off until Saturday. All right, so that is me. Here are the links to everything that I do online. MikeSchmitz.com is my personal site. TheSweetSetup.com is where you'll find most of the Obsidian stuff. _ Mike Schmitz on Twitter, and links to all of the podcasts that I do. And at this point, let's answer some questions, Nick.
Yeah, way to go, Mike. This is pretty impressive. So at this time, you can do a couple claps in the chat, but what I think is the best applause is if you can share something that you've taken away so far from this session. So in the chat, take a moment to think and type out, you know, what's something that you took away? What's something you took a note on? You have an opinion on it. You're going to take it away from this. Let's see what that looks like. I'll just kind of throw out a few as I see them. Consistency beats intensity. We undervalue the things we are good at. Every quarter, what can I stop doing? Your comments on goals and habits. Create, don't consume, and crayons. Give me back my crayons. Yeah, keep reading these. This is great. This is great. Yeah. So yeah, instead of the claps, we're doing takeaways. That's the best clap. That is the best clap.
Yeah, I love this. I love the variety of these too, by the way. This is cool. On the topic of creating real quick, this is the thing that is fascinating to me about the whole idea of personal knowledge management is we've had the ability to collect things for a long time. You dump them into an app, hesitate to use it, but everybody's thinking it. Evernote, right? The elephant in the room. And then it sits there and it doesn't do you any good, right? So a big aha moment for me when I was starting to dive into personal knowledge management, and Nick, you're linking your thinking workshop was a big piece of this, was that there's got to be an output. If there's no output, the information loses its value. I like to think about personal knowledge management as like this water wheel, right? Or a river where there's an inflow and there's an outflow. And the minute that you remove the outflow, the wheel stops turning and you go from being a river to a reservoir, right? Or a cesspool. Like if there's no outflow, it gets stanky. So forcing yourself to create an output, and it doesn't have to be a podcast episode. It doesn't have to be a blog post. Just answering the question, I've collected all this stuff. What does this mean to me? That changes the way you think about your world. And that has a whole bunch of positive effects that you can't really measure in your day-to-day life.
That's really well said. Actually, I really like that metaphor too, and where you took it. We have 11 minutes for some questions. Wonderful takeaways in the chat. And so I can tee up a couple of these for you, Mike. Feel free to read them yourself. But the first one we'll answer with the most upvotes comes from Danny. And that is, how do you create connected project permanent structure, MOC index, evergreen notes that link ideas together? So that might be a hefty one to take on, but yeah, throw it your way.
That is yeah. So I had a Twitter thread today um, that I published right before this with like the different ways that I use Obsidian. It started for me with I take these sermon sketch notes. I've been doing them in Good Notes ever since September of 2017. And I wanted a way to link together the verses between the different sermon notes that I took. So that was the first layer I added inside of Obsidian. So I broke everything apart into atomic notes. Each Bible verse was its own individual note, and then I would embed those in the notes for a specific sermon note page, and also embed the image. But I also like a lot of the stuff that I do is built on this idea of faith-based productivity. So I've got these Bible verses now. I've got these different topics that these sermon sketch notes talk about. I also read a lot of books. Okay, so now I've got the books and I'm breaking apart those ideas into their own atomic notes. And then I'll use the MOCs as kind of like the workshop. That was one thing I really picked up from the workshop you did, Nick, is like that's your workbench. That's where you're assembling this stuff and you're figuring out what do you think about all this stuff. So one example that I've shared publicly is when I was wrestling through this whole stuff with habits versus goals. I'm like, I don't like goals, but why don't I like goals? Well, habits seem like the right thing. So how do those actually work? And I remember reading The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, the one that everybody has read, and seeing those 3 steps, cue, routine, reward. And I'm like, I don't like that. Why don't I like that? Oh, it's because when the cue appears, it assumes that you automatically follow through with the routine. Well, that's not true. I have free will. Like it makes it easier. That thing instigates it, but if I don't want to do that thing, I have the power to stop it. So then I read James Clear's Atomic. I created an MOC about habits. Like, what do I think about this? Read James Clear's Atomic Habits. Oh, there's a 4th step. I like that a lot better. So I pull that into the note. And then I read Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and I see the Fogg behavioral model and the little graph about when you've got the motivation and the ability, the action happens. Like, oh, so I can develop my own skills in certain area to increase my ability, or I can increase the motivation, make it easier to do. And this stuff kind of all comes together for me. And then it's like, okay, what does this mean to me? Well, this is what my morning routine looks like. This is what my evening routine looks like. It's not always like that, but I create those MLCs just when I have those mental squeeze points. I think that's another thing I picked up from you, Nick. Like, I want to figure out what I think about this. And then I'll just drop little pieces in there. And eventually, like, I'll get to the point where, okay, yeah, I get this, archive that MOC so I don't have a gazillion of them and move on to something else. But I'm always trying to figure out, I'm always trying to solve a specific problem. And it's not a problem like, what do I do about X? It's like, what do I think about X?
Nicely said. We're going to move on. Let's see, what do we have? Maybe hopefully 1 or 2 more. This is an interesting one too, though, is and I might riff on it just a little bit, but how can I do these things and not feel like a robot? So Joel has already responded. One answer: remind yourself how robotic your responses to situations are when you don't have an intentional practice. Actually, I'll just turn it over to you if you want to
Yeah.
go from there.
So you can live your life by design or by default. The truth is, we, in a lot of ways, are robots, and we don't understand the inputs and like the things that trigger us to act a certain way. We just follow the inertia, right? So the personal treat for me is intentionally stopping the automation that is my day-to-day life and being like, okay, just hold on a second. What do I want this to look like? Time blocking kind of does that the same way. So instead of just responding to whatever seems to be urgent in front of me, I am deciding this is what's important and this is the time that I'm going to do these things. Does it go perfectly? No, but it's the intention that provides the value. I'm not feeling the stress, wondering, okay, I just finished this thing. Now I got to find something else to do because I know I got a lot to do today, but I don't know what's most important, right? I've thought through that. I force myself to work within these constraints, and I choose to pick the things that are going to lead me towards that ideal future so that eventually I get there, even if it doesn't happen, as quickly as you think it should.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic, gap versus the gain.
Yeah, well said. You can live your life by design or by default. You have a lot of zingers, Mike. One of one of the things I want hit on though is, oftentimes we can look at somebody and say, well, just wait till you have children, then we'll see. And here you are, you're doing amazing work consistently, and you have 5 children. Like that,
That's
that's,
true.
I don't know. I just think that's quite remarkable. When you look at somebody out there on the internet and you consider what their life is like, that you're doing what you're doing with that speaks to the value of the systems that you've set up, the routines, the things that you've put intention behind. I just
Mhm.
wanted to throw a spotlight on that.
Thank you. When you got motivation, it makes everything easier. Viktor Frankl, I think. I mean, I'm not in the same situation he was in. I'm not equating that at all. But he said something that really resonated with me. Person who has a why to live can deal with any how, right? When you know why you're doing what you're doing, everything that happens in your day to day that's fighting against that, you can overcome that. You don't get frustrated that those obstacles are there. You just figure out, how do I overcome this one? And then the next one, and then the next one. You don't get overwhelmed like, oh man, another obstacle, right? You know where you're going. You know why you're doing this. Can I pick one of these questions I want to answer real quickly about
Of
how
course.
you combat the feeling of hopelessness when you realize your system is critically faulty? I think this is really, really important. Um, you don't try to fix everything at once. You pick one thing. That's another great book, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. There's an amazing question in there that said, what one thing by doing it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? That is the place that you start. Going back to James Clear, like 1% better, right? Those 1% improvements will compound more quickly than you realize. So that's really what I'm doing with these personal retreats. I'm looking for those opportunities to optimize for the outcome I want. Going back to like the defaults and the robots, right? We live our life by default a lot of times, and we don't even think about the long-term results of the choices that we're making. We've optimized in those moments for how I feel, for comfort. And I'm not saying like, I'm not going all Jocko Willink and like get up at 4 a.m. whether you feel like it or not. But the truth is that there are ways that you can implement that in small doses. You don't have to go full Jocko. And you can say, um, I want to have a little bit more margin in my life. Well, what are the things that I can do to create more margin in a specific area, right? Or I want to have a better relationship with my significant other. Well, one of the things I've done to optimize for that is the weekly date nights, right? And that's the kind of thing doesn't happen by default. We got 5 kids. We're busy. If we don't prioritize that, put it on the schedule, it's not going to happen. And then we're going to wonder, where the heck did the time go? How did we end up where we are, right? Suddenly never happens suddenly. It just feels that way. You are where you are today because of the choices that you've been making. So shine a light on what choices you're making and the results of those choices, and then make some different choices if you don't like the results you're getting.
Yeah. Well said with that one. Okay, so I think we're at the very end. Um, I want while you think about some final words there, Mike. Now we can fill up the chat with some applause, some claps, and because we started with takeaways, and that is
Mhm.
those are the claps. Takeaways are the claps. But yeah, shout out also to your wife, of course, for the brilliant tag team that you two must be pulling off there. It's just pretty cool to see.
She's amazing. One other quick response to this question from Isaac. Could you share a little bit about how your faith meets your productivity? Because I think even if you aren't a person of faith, this is important. For me, faith is the spiritual why behind all the productivity things. It is the strongest why that I can find. And the whole concept of like finding your why is not unique. There's lots of people who are smarter, more eloquent than I am who have talked about that. Simon Sinek is one that comes to mind. But finding your why is really, really powerful. And then just figuring out how to not just have a why, but amplify its meaning will provide so much clarity, so much momentum, so much motivation in whatever areas of your life you want to improve. So that's where faith meets productivity for me. And then technology, Obsidian happens to be the way that that manifests a lot of time. But I actually just updated my Twitter bio from Ship 30 for 30. They're talking about like defining your niche. I talk about the intersection of productivity, faith, and tech. That's what I landed at.
Wonderful. Well, it's just been great to have you lead us through a lot of different territory, Mike, in a very calm and clear way. And I think we all took a lot of insights. We'll try to save this chat so it's handy. There are a few more questions here. And we're kind of just moving the conversation back to Twitter for so many lasting takeaways, so we can continue the crowdsourced note-making efforts. But yeah, Mike, just a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
All right, so we're gonna have a 2-minute cool down video, but we're going to wrap it up here. So thank you, everyone, and until next time.